The rise of Charlemagne was deeply rooted in the history of the Carolingian dynasty, a family that would shape the course of medieval Europe. Before Charlemagne's ascension, his ancestors had already begun transforming the political landscape of the Frankish kingdom. The dynasty's foundation was laid by Charles Martel, Charlemagne's grandfather, a powerful military leader who secured Frankish dominance through decisive victories, most notably at the Battle of Tours in 732. This battle was instrumental in halting the Muslim advance into Western Europe, reinforcing the Carolingians' reputation as defenders of Christendom. While Charles Martel was never officially king, he acted as the de facto ruler of the Franks, wielding authority as the mayor of the palace. His strong leadership established a foundation for his son, Pepin the Short, to claim the throne. Unlike his father, Pepin sought legitimacy for his rule, forging close ties with the papacy. By deposing the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, in 751, Pepin became the first Carolingian king, crowned with the Pope's blessing. This act not only secured his rule, but also strengthened the alliance between the Carolingians and the Church, a relationship that would later be pivotal in Charlemagne's reign. Pepin's rule was marked by military expansion and political consolidation. He led successful campaigns against the Lombards in Italy and subdued various rebellious factions within his realm. However, perhaps his most enduring legacy was the so-called Donation of Pepin, in which he granted conquered Lombard territories to the Pope, laying the foundation for the Papal States. This further cemented the Carolingian alliance with the Church and established the dynasty as the protectors of Christendom. Charlemagne, born in 742, was raised in this environment of political ambition and religious devotion. Little is known about his early life, but it is clear that he was given an education befitting a future ruler. He likely learned the art of warfare, governance, and diplomacy from an early age, preparing him for the responsibilities that would soon fall upon him. His upbringing emphasized the importance of military strength and the necessity of maintaining a strong connection with the Church. In 768, upon Pepin's death, the kingdom was divided between Charlemagne and his younger brother, Carloman, in accordance with Frankish tradition. This division, however, was fraught with tension, as both brothers sought to assert dominance over the realm. Charlemagne controlled the western portion of the kingdom, while Carloman ruled the eastern lands. Their relationship was uneasy, and their inability to cooperate threatened the stability of the empire their father had built. The tension between the brothers came to an abrupt end in 771 when Carloman died unexpectedly. The circumstances of his death remain uncertain, but it provided Charlemagne with an opportunity to consolidate power. Instead of dividing Carloman's territory among his heirs, Charlemagne swiftly moved to take control of the entire Frankish realm. This bold move was met with resistance from Carloman's supporters and even the Lombards, but Charlemagne's military and political acumen allowed him to emerge victorious. With his authority secured, Charlemagne turned his attention to the challenges facing his kingdom. The Franks were surrounded by hostile forces, including the Lombards in Italy, the Saxons in the north, and the Moors in Spain. Additionally, internal divisions and rebellious nobles threatened the stability of his rule. Recognizing the importance of a strong and unified kingdom, Charlemagne began implementing policies that would strengthen his control over the vast Frankish lands. One of Charlemagne's greatest strengths was his ability to combine military force with diplomacy. He carefully maintained alliances with powerful figures, including the papacy, which continued to view the Carolingians as essential protectors of Christianity. He also sought to integrate various conquered peoples into his realm, using both military campaigns and religious conversion as tools of unification. As the sole ruler of the Franks, Charlemagne set the stage for the expansion of his empire. His ambitions extended far beyond merely defending his territory. He sought to create a Christian empire that would rival the great civilizations of the past. Over the coming decades, he would launch numerous military campaigns, expanding his realm across Western and Central Europe, laying the foundation for what would later be known as the Holy Roman Empire. The rise of the Carolingians was not merely a political shift, but a transformation of European history. Charlemagne inherited a strong kingdom built by his ancestors, but his vision and leadership would take it to unprecedented heights. His story was just beginning, and the legacy of his rule would shape the future of Europe for centuries to come. Charlemagne's path to absolute power was not an easy one. Following the death of his brother Carloman in 771, he faced numerous challenges in consolidating his rule over the Frankish kingdom. Despite tensions with Carloman's supporters and external threats from rival kingdoms, Charlemagne swiftly asserted his authority, proving himself as a decisive and strategic leader. This consolidation of power set the stage for one of the most significant moments in European history: his coronation as Emperor of the Romans on December 25, 800 AD. The political landscape of Western Europe during Charlemagne's reign was highly unstable. The remnants of the Roman Empire had long since fragmented, leaving a power vacuum filled by warring kingdoms, barbarian tribes, and the Catholic Church. In this environment, Charlemagne's military prowess allowed him to expand his influence far beyond the traditional borders of the Frankish kingdom. His campaigns against the Lombards, Saxons, and Moors demonstrated his ability to impose order on an otherwise chaotic continent. One of Charlemagne's earliest and most significant conquests was his campaign against the Lombards in 773. The Lombards, a Germanic people who had ruled parts of Italy since the 6th century, posed a direct threat to the papacy. Pope Adrian I, fearing Lombard aggression, appealed to Charlemagne for assistance. Recognizing both the political and religious advantages of intervening, Charlemagne marched into Italy, besieged Pavia, and deposed the Lombard king Desiderius in 774. This victory not only expanded Charlemagne's territory, but also reinforced his role as the protector of the church. The alliance between Charlemagne and the papacy was crucial in shaping his reign. Unlike previous Frankish kings, Charlemagne actively supported the church through military defense, religious reform, and economic aid. In return, the papacy granted him legitimacy and divine justification for his rule. This relationship between secular and religious authority would later culminate in his imperial coronation. By the end of the 8th century, Charlemagne had established himself as the most powerful ruler in Western Europe. However, his growing influence also led to tensions with the Byzantine Empire, which still considered itself the legitimate continuation of the Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empress Irene, who had seized power in Constantinople, was widely unpopular and faced internal opposition. Many in the West viewed her rule as illegitimate, providing an opportunity for Charlemagne to assert his own claim as the true Roman emperor. The immediate catalyst for Charlemagne's coronation came in 799, when Pope Leo III was attacked by Roman nobles who sought to depose him. Fearing for his safety, Leo fled to Charlemagne's court and pleaded for protection. Charlemagne, recognizing the political significance of the moment, escorted the Pope back to Rome and reinstated him as head of the church. This act further solidified Charlemagne's role as the defender of Christendom and strengthened his position as the dominant ruler in Europe. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Charlemagne attended Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. In a moment that would change the course of history, Pope Leo III placed a crown upon Charlemagne's head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. According to contemporary accounts, Charlemagne was taken by surprise and had not anticipated this event. However, some historians speculate that he was fully aware of the Pope's intentions and had carefully orchestrated the occasion to legitimize his rule. The coronation of Charlemagne was highly symbolic. By reviving the title of Roman Emperor in the West, it signified the continuation of Roman traditions under Frankish rule. It also established a precedent for the Holy Roman Empire, which would endure for nearly 1,000 years. Moreover, it reaffirmed the idea that secular authority and religious authority were intertwined, with the Pope possessing the power to crown emperors. Despite its significance, Charlemagne's imperial title was not universally accepted. The Byzantine Empire, which still considered itself the rightful heir of Rome, refused to recognize his claim. It was not until 812 that Emperor Michael I of Byzantium reluctantly acknowledged Charlemagne as emperor, though the East and West remained politically divided. Nevertheless, Charlemagne's coronation marked the beginning of a new era in European history, where kings sought divine approval for their rule. The imperial coronation of Charlemagne represented the culmination of decades of military conquest, political maneuvering, and religious diplomacy. It was the moment when he transitioned from a powerful Frankish king to the ruler of a vast empire that sought to revive the legacy of Rome. This event would shape medieval Europe's political structure, reinforcing the concept of a Christian empire guided by both divine authority and military strength. Charlemagne had become more than just a king. He was now the ruler of Christendom, laying the foundation for a new European order. The reign of Charlemagne was defined by his relentless military campaigns, which significantly expanded the Frankish Empire. Through a combination of strategic warfare, diplomatic alliances, and enforced religious conversion, Charlemagne established his dominance over much of Western and Central Europe. His conquests not only extended the reach of his rule, but also laid the foundation for the Holy Roman Empire, shaping the future of European political and cultural history. One of Charlemagne's greatest military strengths was his ability to command a highly organized and disciplined army. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who relied on temporary levies and fragmented forces, Charlemagne developed a professional military system. His troops were well-equipped, trained in various forms of combat, and supported by an extensive network of supply lines. Additionally, he utilized a combination of cavalry and infantry, allowing him to adapt to different battle conditions. His military prowess enabled him to undertake ambitious campaigns against multiple enemies across the continent. Charlemagne's most prolonged and brutal conflict was the Saxon Wars, which lasted from 772 to 804. The Saxons, a fierce and independent Germanic people, resisted Frankish rule and refused to convert to Christianity. Charlemagne launched a series of devastating campaigns to subjugate them, using both military force and religious coercion. He destroyed their sacred sites, including the Irminsul, a significant pagan symbol, and forcibly baptized thousands of Saxons. However, the Saxons, led by their warrior chief Widukind, repeatedly rebelled, resulting in a cycle of conquest and uprisings. Eventually, after over 3 decades of relentless warfare, Charlemagne secured victory by executing thousands of Saxon captives in the Massacre of Verdun, 782, and relocating rebellious groups to different regions of the empire. In addition to his campaigns in Saxony, Charlemagne also turned his attention southward, where the Lombards in Italy posed a persistent threat. After his initial conquest of the Lombard kingdom in 774, he faced continued resistance from Lombard nobles who sought to reclaim their independence. Charlemagne reinforced Frankish rule in Italy by appointing loyal governors and integrating Lombard territories into his growing empire. He also strengthened his alliance with the papacy, further solidifying his position as the protector of the church. Another significant military campaign took place in Spain, where Charlemagne attempted to expand Frankish influence beyond the Pyrenees. In 778, he launched an invasion of Muslim-controlled Al-Andalus, seeking to support rebellious Muslim governors who had promised allegiance to him. However, the campaign ended in failure, culminating in the infamous Battle of Roncesvalles Pass. During the retreat through the Pyrenees, Charlemagne's rear guard, led by his commander Roland, was ambushed and annihilated by Basque warriors. This event later became legendary, inspiring the epic poem The Song of Roland, which glorified Charlemagne's knights and their heroic sacrifices. Despite this setback, Charlemagne did achieve military success in the Spanish March, a buffer zone established along the border between his empire and Muslim-controlled Spain. Through a series of later campaigns, he captured several key cities, including Barcelona in 801. These victories created a defensive frontier that safeguarded the Frankish kingdom from future Muslim incursions while providing opportunities for Christian expansion into the Iberian Peninsula. Charlemagne's conquests extended beyond Western Europe as well. In the east, he launched campaigns against the Avars, a nomadic people who controlled vast territories in Central Europe. The Avars had long been a threat to both the Franks and the Byzantine Empire, raiding settlements and demanding tribute. Between 791 and 796, Charlemagne waged a series of decisive campaigns that resulted in the complete destruction of the Avar Khaganate. This victory allowed the Franks to expand into the Danube region, further consolidating Charlemagne's control over Central Europe. Throughout his military campaigns, Charlemagne employed a strategy of cultural and religious assimilation to maintain control over conquered territories. He often imposed Christianity upon subdued populations, integrating them into the Frankish way of life. Churches and monasteries were built across newly acquired lands, serving both as centers of religious conversion and administrative governance. Charlemagne also encouraged the settlement of Frankish nobles and soldiers in these regions, ensuring loyalty to his rule. Despite the widespread violence of his conquests, Charlemagne was not merely a warrior king. He was also a master diplomat. He skillfully negotiated alliances with other rulers, including the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate. His relationship with the great Muslim ruler Caliph Harun al-Rashid, of 1001 Nights fame, led to an exchange of gifts, including a prized elephant named Abul Abbas, which became a symbol of Charlemagne's prestige. These diplomatic efforts demonstrated his ability to balance military aggression with strategic partnerships. By the early 9th century, Charlemagne had created one of the largest empires seen in Europe since the fall of Rome. His conquests unified vast territories under a single ruler, bringing stability to regions that had long been plagued by warfare and political fragmentation. However, maintaining control over such a vast empire required more than just military strength. It demanded a sophisticated system of governance, which Charlemagne would develop in the years to come. Charlemagne's wars and conquests were not only about territorial expansion. They were part of a larger vision to unify Christendom under his rule. Through military might, religious policy, and diplomatic strategy, he transformed the Frankish kingdom into a dominant European power. Yet, as history would later show, even the mightiest of empires faced challenges in maintaining their dominance. Among the many military campaigns of Charlemagne, none were as prolonged, brutal, or transformative as the Saxon Wars. This conflict, which lasted from 772 to 804, was one of the most defining struggles of his reign. The Saxons, a fierce and independent Germanic people, resisted Frankish domination for more than 30 years, making them one of Charlemagne's most persistent enemies. His war against them was not only a battle for territorial expansion, but also a religious crusade to impose Christianity upon a pagan society. The Saxon Wars revealed Charlemagne's unyielding ambition, his strategic military prowess, and the ruthlessness with which he maintained order in his empire. The Saxons lived in the forests and river valleys of present-day northern Germany, along the borders of Charlemagne's empire. Unlike the more settled societies of the Franks and Lombards, the Saxons were tribal, decentralized, and fiercely independent. Their political structure made them difficult to conquer, as there was no single leader who could surrender on behalf of all Saxons. Instead, Charlemagne faced a series of fragmented rebellions, requiring repeated campaigns to subdue them. The war began in 772, when Charlemagne launched his first expedition into Saxon territory. His initial target was Eresburg, a key Saxon fortress, which he quickly captured. As part of his strategy to dismantle Saxon resistance, he ordered the destruction of the Irminsul, a sacred pillar central to Saxon pagan worship. This act was both symbolic and strategic. It demoralized the Saxons and demonstrated Charlemagne's intent to replace their religious and cultural identity with Christianity. However, this early victory did not secure the region, as Saxon uprisings soon followed. One of the most formidable Saxon leaders was Widukind, a warrior who became the face of resistance against Charlemagne. Unlike the Franks, who had a structured army, Saxon warfare relied on swift, guerrilla-style attacks. Widukind and his forces struck when Charlemagne's armies were occupied elsewhere, often ambushing Frankish garrisons and raiding Christian settlements. His ability to unite various Saxon tribes prolonged the war, frustrating Charlemagne's attempts to achieve a decisive victory. Charlemagne responded with increasingly harsh tactics. He adopted a scorched earth strategy, systematically burning Saxon villages, destroying crops, and forcing entire communities to submit. One of the most infamous events of the Saxon Wars occurred in 782, when Charlemagne ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon prisoners at the massacre of Verdun. This act was intended to crush resistance, but instead it deepened Saxon hatred and prolonged the conflict. Charlemagne's willingness to use such extreme measures reflected his determination to integrate the Saxons into his empire, even at the cost of mass violence. The war was not merely a territorial struggle, it was also a religious crusade. Charlemagne saw the Saxons not only as enemies of the Frankish state, but also as obstacles to the spread of Christianity. Conquest was followed by forced conversions, with Saxons required to undergo baptism and accept Christian laws. Those who refused were often executed or exiled. In 785, Widukind himself was captured and baptized, a moment that symbolized the beginning of the Saxons' reluctant submission to Christian rule. Despite these efforts, Saxon resistance did not end immediately. Over the next 2 decades, various rebellions erupted, forcing Charlemagne to repeatedly return to the region. To solidify Frankish control, he enacted strict policies, including the Capitulary on the Saxons, which imposed severe punishments for any Saxon who refused to convert. Pagan rituals were outlawed, and harsh penalties, including death, were imposed on those who continued to practice their old religion. This period marked the near-total eradication of Saxon paganism, as Christianity became the dominant faith in the region. By 804, after more than 3 decades of warfare, the Saxons were finally subdued. Charlemagne forcibly relocated thousands of Saxons to other parts of his empire, a tactic designed to break their tribal unity and prevent further uprisings. This marked the definitive end of the Saxon Wars and solidified Frankish rule over northern Germany. Although the Saxons had resisted for decades, their defeat ultimately brought them into the fold of the Carolingian Empire, reshaping the religious and political landscape of Central Europe. The consequences of the Saxon Wars were profound. On one hand, they demonstrated Charlemagne's military brilliance and unwavering commitment to expansion. On the other hand, they revealed the ruthlessness of his rule, as the conflict resulted in massive loss of life and the destruction of an entire cultural identity. His success in integrating the Saxons not only expanded his empire, but also reinforced the power of the Frankish Church, as Christianity became the dominant force in northern Europe. Charlemagne's victory over the Saxons was one of the most significant achievements of his reign. It marked the completion of his territorial expansion in the north and cemented his legacy as both a warrior king and a Christian ruler. However, conquest alone was not enough to sustain an empire of such vast proportions. The next challenge was governance. How would Charlemagne rule such a diverse and sprawling territory? The following chapter will explore the administrative and political systems he implemented to maintain control over his vast empire. The expansion of Charlemagne's empire through relentless warfare created a vast and diverse realm stretching from the Pyrenees in the west to the Danube in the east, and from the North Sea to central Italy. However, conquering these lands was only the first step. Governing them effectively was an even greater challenge. Charlemagne recognized that maintaining order required a sophisticated system of administration, capable of unifying his multi-ethnic empire while ensuring loyalty to his rule. His governance was characterized by centralized authority, regional oversight, legal reforms, and a strong alliance with the Church, a framework that would influence European politics for centuries. One of Charlemagne's most notable contributions to governance was the Missi Dominici system, a network of royal envoys sent throughout the empire to enforce his laws and ensure local rulers remained loyal. These envoys, typically consisting of a noble and a bishop, acted as the emperor's representatives, traveling between different regions to conduct inspections, resolve disputes, and report on any signs of corruption or rebellion. This system helped bridge the gap between the central government in Aachen and the distant provinces, reinforcing Charlemagne's authority over local rulers who might otherwise act independently. At the heart of Charlemagne's administrative system was the division of his empire into counties, each governed by a count, or comes in Latin. Counts were responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining justice, and leading local militias. To balance power and prevent any one noble from becoming too influential, Charlemagne frequently rotated his officials and appointed individuals based on merit rather than solely on noble birth. In border regions, known as marches, he appointed margraves, who had greater military authority and were tasked with defending the empire from external threats, such as the Muslims in Spain or the Slavs in the east. Law and justice were central concerns for Charlemagne, who sought to create a uniform legal system across his empire. Prior to his rule, different regions followed their own traditional laws, leading to inconsistencies in governance. Charlemagne worked to standardize laws by issuing capitularies, royal decrees that applied across the empire. These capitularies addressed issues ranging from military service and taxation to religious conduct and economic policies. One of his most famous legal reforms was the Capitulary for the Saxons, which imposed strict penalties for resisting Christian conversion, illustrating how law was intertwined with religion in his rule. The economic structure of Charlemagne's empire also played a crucial role in its administration. Unlike the Roman Empire, which had a highly developed monetary economy, early medieval Europe relied heavily on a manorial system, where wealth was based on land ownership and agricultural production. Charlemagne sought to strengthen his economy by standardizing weights and measures, regulating trade, and encouraging the use of a single currency, the silver denarius. These reforms helped facilitate commerce across his vast empire, ensuring stability and economic growth. One of Charlemagne's greatest administrative challenges was communication across his sprawling empire. Roads were often in poor condition, and long-distance travel was slow and dangerous. To address this, he improved infrastructure, restoring old Roman roads and constructing bridges to facilitate movement between different regions. Additionally, he established a postal system that relied on relay stations, allowing messages and official documents to travel more efficiently. While these improvements did not match the efficiency of the ancient Roman road system, they significantly enhanced communication compared to earlier medieval standards. The Frankish Church played an essential role in Charlemagne's governance. As a deeply religious ruler, he viewed the church not only as a spiritual institution, but also as a tool for unifying his empire. Bishops and abbots were frequently appointed to administrative roles, and monasteries became centers of learning and record-keeping. Charlemagne also ensured that church lands were well managed, requiring clergy to maintain detailed inventories of their properties and resources. His close relationship with the papacy strengthened his legitimacy, as his rule was framed as divinely sanctioned. Education and intellectual advancement were also integral to Charlemagne's administration. Recognizing the importance of literate officials, he initiated the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning and culture. He established the Palace School in Aachen, where scholars from across Europe, including the famous Anglo-Saxon monk Alcuin of York, taught subjects such as Latin, theology, and mathematics. This emphasis on education ensured that his government had trained clerks, judges, and diplomats, creating a more efficient bureaucracy. Despite his well-organized system of governance, Charlemagne still faced challenges in maintaining control over his empire. Local revolts, external invasions, and the vast distances between territories made administration difficult. To counter these threats, he frequently traveled across his empire, personally overseeing legal cases, holding court, and inspecting local defenses. His presence as a ruler in motion reinforced his authority, making him a unifying figure throughout his vast domain. Charlemagne's administrative reforms laid the groundwork for medieval European governance. His use of regional oversight, legal standardization, economic regulation, and religious integration created a model that future European rulers would adopt. Though his empire would eventually fragment after his death, his governance system influenced the structure of feudalism and the later Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne's rule was not only marked by military conquests and administrative reforms, but also by a profound transformation in education and culture. Recognizing that a strong empire required educated officials and clergy, Charlemagne initiated a period of intellectual and artistic revival that would later be known as the Carolingian Renaissance. This cultural movement aimed to restore learning, standardize religious practices, and promote artistic and architectural advancements. Though Europe had long been in a state of intellectual decline following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Charlemagne's efforts helped to preserve and expand classical knowledge, laying the foundations for future European scholarship. At the core of the Carolingian Renaissance was education reform, driven by Charlemagne's belief that learning was essential for both governance and religious life. Prior to his reign, literacy had declined significantly, with few people outside of the clergy able to read or write. To address this, Charlemagne ordered the creation of schools attached to monasteries and cathedrals, ensuring that young nobles and clergy received formal instruction. The most famous of these institutions was the Palace School in Aachen, where scholars from across Europe were invited to teach and study. One of the most influential figures of this intellectual revival was Alcuin of York, an Anglo-Saxon scholar whom Charlemagne recruited to lead the Palace School. Alcuin played a crucial role in standardizing Latin, refining the curriculum, and developing educational materials that would be used throughout the empire. Under his guidance, subjects such as grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy were taught, forming the basis of the medieval liberal arts. Charlemagne himself, though illiterate for much of his life, actively participated in these lessons and encouraged his court to embrace scholarship. A significant achievement of the Carolingian Renaissance was the preservation and copying of classical texts. Many ancient Roman and Greek works had been lost or neglected after the fall of Rome, but Charlemagne's scholars worked to transcribe and compile these texts in monastic scriptoria. This effort ensured the survival of important writings by authors such as Virgil, Cicero, Boethius, and Augustine, which might have otherwise disappeared. Additionally, the development of Carolingian minuscule, a clear and uniform script, improved the readability of manuscripts and became the basis for modern European handwriting. Religious reform was another crucial aspect of Charlemagne's cultural revival. He sought to unify Christian practices across his empire by standardizing liturgy, biblical texts, and clerical education. To achieve this, he supported the production of an authoritative version of the Vulgate Bible, ensuring that religious teachings were consistent throughout his territories. He also enforced discipline among the clergy, requiring priests to be properly educated and monasteries to follow strict rules of conduct. By reinforcing religious orthodoxy, Charlemagne strengthened both the church and his own political authority. Art and architecture also flourished during the Carolingian Renaissance. Inspired by Roman and Byzantine influences, Charlemagne commissioned the construction of grand buildings that reflected the unity and power of his empire. The most famous example of Carolingian architecture is the Palatine Chapel in Aachen, which served as Charlemagne's royal church and a symbol of his imperial ambitions. The chapel featured a central octagonal plan, domed ceilings, and elaborate mosaics, designs reminiscent of Roman and Byzantine structures. This architectural revival marked the first significant building campaign in Western Europe since the fall of Rome. In addition to religious and educational reforms, Charlemagne encouraged the development of Carolingian art, which included illuminated manuscripts, metalwork, and sculptures. Manuscript illumination, in particular, became a sophisticated art form, with intricate decorations adorning religious texts. The Coronation Gospels, one of the most famous Carolingian manuscripts, showcased a classical style that reflected Roman artistic traditions. These artistic advancements reinforced Charlemagne's vision of a revived Roman Empire, blending classical heritage with Christian themes. The Carolingian Renaissance was not only a revival of past traditions, but also a period of innovation. New administrative and educational practices emerged, influencing medieval European society for centuries. By investing in learning and culture, Charlemagne ensured that future generations of rulers, clergy, and scholars would have access to knowledge that had been nearly lost in the post-Roman era. This intellectual revival helped to lay the groundwork for later medieval universities and the broader cultural developments of the High Middle Ages. However, despite its successes, the Carolingian Renaissance faced limitations. Literacy remained largely confined to the clergy and nobility, with the majority of the population still unable to read or write. Additionally, after Charlemagne's death, political instability and external invasions slowed the momentum of cultural progress. Nevertheless, the impact of his reforms endured, influencing the development of European education, art, and governance long after his empire had fragmented. Charlemagne's commitment to learning and cultural revival set him apart from many of his contemporaries. While he is often remembered for his military conquests, his efforts to restore knowledge, preserve classical texts, and elevate artistic expression were equally significant. Through the Carolingian Renaissance, he not only strengthened his empire, but also safeguarded Europe's intellectual heritage. As Charlemagne grew older, the vast empire he had built faced increasing challenges. His later years were marked by a mixture of continued success and growing difficulties, including governance concerns, external threats, and the question of succession. Though he remained a formidable ruler until his death, his empire showed signs of strain under its immense size and complexity. Despite these challenges, Charlemagne's later years were crucial in shaping the long-term stability and legacy of the Carolingian Empire. One of the major difficulties Charlemagne faced was the administration of his vast territories. While his system of governance, particularly the use of the Missi Dominici, had been effective, the empire remained a collection of diverse regions with different customs and traditions. Keeping control required constant travel and oversight, and as he aged, Charlemagne was no longer able to personally visit all parts of his empire. This led to increasing reliance on local nobles, some of whom began acting with greater independence, foreshadowing the feudal fragmentation that would follow his death. Another major issue was the continued threat of external invasions. Though Charlemagne had successfully defended and expanded his empire through decades of warfare, new challenges emerged in his later years. In the north, Viking raids along the coasts of Francia signaled the beginning of a new era of Norse expansion. In the east, Slavic and Avar groups still posed a threat, while in the south, the Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba in Spain remained a powerful force. Though Charlemagne managed to hold these threats at bay, his successors would struggle to maintain the same level of control. Despite these challenges, Charlemagne continued to strengthen his empire. He reinforced his alliance with the Catholic Church, ensuring that his rule was seen as divinely sanctioned. In 800 AD, he achieved one of the most significant moments of his reign when Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans on Christmas Day in St. Peter's Basilica. This event marked the revival of the Roman imperial title in the West, which had been vacant since the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. While Charlemagne had not actively sought the title, its conferral solidified his status as the most powerful ruler in Western Europe. However, this new imperial title also created tensions with the Byzantine Empire, which still considered itself the legitimate continuation of Rome. The Byzantines initially refused to recognize Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans, seeing it as a challenge to their own authority. Although diplomacy eventually eased tensions, this dispute highlighted the growing divide between the eastern and western halves of Christendom, a divide that would eventually contribute to the Great Schism of 1054. As Charlemagne aged, he faced the critical issue of succession. Unlike later European monarchies that followed a system of primogeniture, Frankish tradition dictated that an empire be divided among a ruler's sons. This custom had historically led to internal conflicts and fragmentation. Initially, Charlemagne intended to divide his empire among his three sons, Charles the Younger, Pepin of Italy, and Louis the Pious. However, fate intervened. Charles the Younger and Pepin both died before their father, leaving Louis as the sole heir. In 813 AD, recognizing that his death was near, Charlemagne took the unusual step of personally crowning Louis the Pious as his successor. This act was intended to ensure a smooth transition and prevent disputes over succession. However, while Charlemagne had successfully passed on his empire to his son, he could not guarantee its unity. After his death, the empire would eventually be divided among Louis's sons, leading to internal conflicts that weakened Carolingian rule. Charlemagne died on January 28, 814, at the age of 71. He was buried in the Palatine Chapel in Aachen, the city that had served as the heart of his empire. His death marked the end of an era, as no ruler after him would be able to maintain the empire at its full strength. Despite this, Charlemagne's legacy endured, influencing European history in profound ways. One of the most significant aspects of Charlemagne's legacy was the idea of a united Christian Europe under a single ruler, an idea that would later inspire the Holy Roman Empire and shape medieval political thought. His emphasis on education, legal reform, and centralized governance laid the groundwork for the development of feudalism and the medieval state system. Even centuries after his death, European rulers looked to Charlemagne as a model of strong and effective kingship. Charlemagne's later years reflected both the greatness and limitations of his rule. While he successfully maintained control over his vast empire, the cracks that would lead to its eventual fragmentation were already beginning to show. His empire did not last in its full form, but his influence shaped the course of European history for generations to come. Charlemagne's death in 814 marked the beginning of a period of instability that would eventually lead to the disintegration of his vast empire. Though he had carefully planned for his son Louis the Pious to succeed him, the challenges of governing such a large and diverse territory soon became evident. The unity that Charlemagne had imposed through military conquest, religious authority, and administrative reform proved difficult to maintain under his successors. The combination of internal disputes, external invasions, and the traditional Frankish practice of dividing lands among heirs led to the gradual fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire. Upon ascending to the throne, Louis the Pious faced the immense challenge of maintaining his father's empire while addressing growing tensions among the Frankish nobility. Unlike Charlemagne, who had ruled with absolute authority, Louis attempted to govern through cooperation with the aristocracy and the church. While he was a devout and pious ruler, his policies often led to instability. His efforts to reform the church and enforce stricter moral codes alienated many nobles, who saw his rule as too weak and idealistic. A major turning point in the empire's decline came in 817, when Louis issued the Ordinatio Imperii, a decree intended to secure the empire's future. This document divided the empire among his three sons, Lothair, Pepin, and Louis the German, granting Lothair the title of emperor, while the other two were given subordinate kingdoms. However, this plan quickly unraveled as conflicts arose between the brothers. The traditional Frankish practice of dividing land among heirs often led to civil wars, and this case was no exception. Matters worsened when Louis the Pious had another son, Charles the Bald, with his second wife, Judith. Determined to provide for his youngest son, Louis attempted to alter the original division of the empire to include Charles. This decision enraged his older sons, leading to multiple rebellions against their own father. In 833, Louis was even deposed and humiliated by his own sons, an event known as the Field of Lies, before eventually being restored to the throne. However, the damage had been done. The empire was no longer unified under a single, strong ruler. When Louis the Pious died in 840, his sons resumed their struggle for dominance, leading to a full-scale civil war. After 3 years of conflict, the warring factions reached a settlement with the Treaty of Verdun in 843, which permanently divided the Carolingian Empire into 3 separate kingdoms. Western Francia, ruled by Charles the Bald, would eventually evolve into the Kingdom of France. Middle Francia, ruled by Lothair, included much of modern-day Italy, the Low Countries, and parts of Germany. He retained the title of emperor, but his kingdom was the weakest and most contested. Eastern Francia, ruled by Louis the German, laid the foundations for what would later become the Holy Roman Empire in Germany. The Treaty of Verdun marked the official end of a unified Carolingian Empire. While Charlemagne had envisioned a strong, centralized realm, his descendants had effectively dismantled it through infighting. The division of the empire also created long-term geopolitical divisions that would shape European history for centuries. The distinction between France and Germany, for example, can be traced directly back to this treaty. As the Carolingian rulers continued to weaken, external threats grew more dangerous. The Vikings, who had already begun raiding the coasts of Francia during Charlemagne's reign, intensified their attacks. By the mid-9th century, Viking longships sailed deep into the interior of the empire, attacking cities like Paris, Rouen, and Hamburg. Meanwhile, In the south, Muslim forces from Al-Andalus in North Africa launched raids into the Mediterranean, while in the east, Magyar and Slavic tribes threatened the borders of eastern Francia. These invasions further destabilized the divided empire, exposing the weaknesses of its rulers. The Carolingian rulers who followed the Treaty of Verdun struggled to maintain control. Successive generations saw further divisions and infighting, and as central authority declined, local nobles and warlords gained more power. This shift in power dynamics contributed to the development of feudalism, a decentralized system in which local lords controlled land and maintained their own armies, often acting independently of the king. While feudalism provided some stability in the absence of strong central rule, it also ensured that the Carolingian rulers would never regain the power that Charlemagne had once held. By the late 10th century, the Carolingian dynasty had nearly disappeared. In France, the last Carolingian king, Louis V, died in 987 without an heir, leading to the rise of the Capetian dynasty, which would rule France for centuries. In Germany, the Carolingians had already been replaced by the Ottonian dynasty, which founded the Holy Roman Empire in 962. Though Charlemagne's empire had collapsed, his influence persisted. His vision of a unified Christian Europe under imperial rule lived on in the Holy Roman Empire, and his administrative and cultural reforms continued to shape medieval Europe. The fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire was inevitable. The sheer size of the empire, combined with Frankish succession customs and growing external threats, made long-term unity impossible. However, Charlemagne's legacy endured not through his descendants, but through the institutions and ideas he had established. His influence on law, education, governance, and religion continued to shape European civilization long after his empire had faded. Charlemagne's reign, though brief in the grand sweep of history, left a profound legacy that shaped the development of Europe for centuries. Though his empire fragmented after his death, his influence continued to resonate through the political, cultural, and religious institutions of the medieval period. Charlemagne's legacy can be seen in the formation of the Holy Roman Empire, the rise of feudalism, and the continued influence of his educational and legal reforms. His vision of a unified Christian Europe was not fully realized in his lifetime, but it laid the groundwork for the political and cultural development of the continent. One of the most significant aspects of Charlemagne's legacy was his role in the formation of the Holy Roman Empire. While Charlemagne's own empire did not survive intact after his death, the idea of a unified Christian empire continued to inspire later rulers. In the year 800, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, reviving the title that had not been used since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Although Charlemagne's empire eventually fragmented into separate kingdoms, his title and vision of a united Christendom would be inherited by later rulers, particularly Otto I of Germany, who was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 962. This marked the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would play a central role in European politics for nearly 1,000 years. Charlemagne's reign also contributed to the development of feudalism, the political and economic system that dominated medieval Europe. Feudalism emerged as a response to the challenges posed by the decline of centralized authority and the increasing power of local lords. Charlemagne's decentralization of power, combined with the growing influence of the aristocracy, created the conditions for feudalism to take root. Under Charlemagne's system, local lords were granted land in exchange for military service, but after his death, these lords became more independent, leading to the gradual breakdown of central authority. The rise of feudalism was a direct result of Charlemagne's inability to establish a lasting centralized bureaucracy, and it would become the dominant system of governance throughout medieval Europe. Charlemagne's influence can also be seen in the development of medieval Christianity. His close relationship with the Pope and his efforts to reform the Church had lasting effects on the religious landscape of Europe. Charlemagne's support for the papacy and his attempts to standardize religious practices helped solidify the Church's power in medieval Europe. The Carolingian Renaissance, which Charlemagne fostered, also played a significant role in preserving classical knowledge and transmitting it to later generations. This intellectual revival laid the foundation for the development of medieval scholasticism and the eventual rise of universities in the High Middle Ages. Furthermore, Charlemagne's legal reforms had a lasting impact on the development of European law. He issued a number of capitularies or royal decrees, which sought to standardize laws across his empire. While these laws were often focused on regulating religious practices and the conduct of the nobility, they also addressed issues such as property rights and inheritance. Charlemagne's efforts to codify and standardize legal practices were an important step in the development of European legal systems. Though his laws did not survive intact, the idea of creating a unified legal code persisted, influencing later medieval legal traditions. Charlemagne's cultural legacy also endured through his support for the arts and the preservation of knowledge. His patronage of scholars, most notably Alcuin of York, led to the revival of classical learning and the creation of important manuscripts that would preserve ancient texts for future generations. The Carolingian Renaissance, though short-lived, was instrumental in preserving the intellectual achievements of the ancient world and transmitting them to the Middle Ages. The Carolingian minuscule, a script developed during this period, became the basis for modern European writing. Charlemagne's support for education and scholarship helped to lay the intellectual foundations for the Renaissance centuries later. Despite the fragmentation of his empire, Charlemagne's influence can still be seen in the political structures that arose in his wake. His descendants, though unable to maintain the unity of his empire, played important roles in shaping the future of Europe. The Capetian dynasty in France and the Ettonian dynasty in Germany both claimed Charlemagne's legacy, and his vision of a united Christian Europe continued to inspire rulers throughout the Middle Ages. The political divisions that followed Charlemagne's death, the splitting of his empire into France, Germany, and Italy, laid the groundwork for the future development of the nation-states of Europe. In addition to his political and religious legacy, Charlemagne's reign helped shape the identity of Europe as a whole. Charlemagne's vision of a united Christian Europe, though never fully realized, became an ideal that would influence European politics for centuries. His reign also contributed to the development of a shared European cultural identity, which was defined in part by Christianity and a common understanding of Roman heritage. Charlemagne's efforts to revive classical learning, promote Christianity, and centralize governance helped shape the cultural and political landscape of medieval Europe. Charlemagne's reign was also instrumental in the development of the medieval monarchy. Charlemagne's ability to combine military strength, religious authority, and administrative efficiency set a precedent for later medieval rulers. His use of local nobles to enforce royal authority laid the foundations for the feudal monarchy that would dominate medieval Europe. Charlemagne's success in balancing the power of the aristocracy with the authority of the crown would influence the development of monarchies across Europe. Finally, Charlemagne's legacy is intertwined with the broader story of Europe's transition from the ancient to the medieval world. His reign marked the end of the ancient world's dominance in Europe and the beginning of a new era of Christian kingdoms and feudal societies. Charlemagne's efforts to merge the legacy of the ancient Roman Empire with the emerging Christian world helped define the medieval period and set the stage for the political, cultural, and religious developments that would follow. Charlemagne's lasting impact on European history cannot be overstated. His political, religious, cultural, and intellectual reforms laid the foundation for the medieval world. Though his empire fragmented after his death, his legacy endured through the formation of the Holy Roman Empire, the rise of feudalism, and the continued influence of his educational and legal reforms. Charlemagne's vision of a unified Christian Europe, his support for learning and the arts, and his efforts to strengthen the church and the monarchy all left an indelible mark on European history. Charlemagne's impact on history was not confined solely to his reign or his immediate descendants. Over the centuries, his legacy has been transformed into a mythic narrative that continues to captivate historians, writers, and artists. The image of Charlemagne as the father of Europe or the emperor of the West has been reshaped and elevated in both political and cultural contexts, sometimes surpassing the reality of his achievements. This mythic status, forged through the lens of later generations, ensured that Charlemagne's reign would not be merely a historical episode, but a symbol of unity, power, and divine sanction for centuries to come. One of the primary reasons for Charlemagne's mythic status was the perception of his reign as a golden age. In the aftermath of the collapse of the Roman Empire and the subsequent fragmentation of Europe, Charlemagne's reign was seen as a restoration of order and stability. His ability to unite the various tribes of Europe and establish a strong, centralized government led later generations to view him as a founder of European civilization. This image was particularly powerful in the High Middle Ages, when rulers sought to align themselves with Charlemagne's legacy to legitimize their own authority. The idea of a unified Christian Europe with Charlemagne as its symbolic first emperor became a cornerstone of medieval political ideology. The concept of the Holy Roman Empire played a significant role in elevating Charlemagne's myth. After the 800 coronation by Pope Leo III, Charlemagne was seen as the rightful heir to the legacy of the Roman emperors, and his empire was believed to have restored the unity of the Roman world. Even after the fragmentation of his empire and the subsequent rise of various European kingdoms, the Holy Roman Empire maintained the belief that Charlemagne had been the first true emperor of a united Europe. Charlemagne was considered a precursor to the Holy Roman emperors who succeeded him, particularly those from the Ettonian dynasty in Germany. His symbolic role as the restorer of Roman imperial power in the West was maintained by successive generations, who looked to his reign as an ideal model of governance. In the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered classical antiquity, Charlemagne's status grew even more prominent. Renaissance humanists such as Francesco Petrarca and Johannes Gutenberg hailed Charlemagne as a heroic figure who had helped preserve the legacy of ancient Rome. This period marked a renewed interest in his reign as a symbol of enlightened leadership and intellectual revival. Charlemagne's role in fostering the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning and culture, was reinterpreted as a precursor to the broader Renaissance movement that would define European culture for centuries. His efforts to promote scholarship, encourage the arts, and patronize education made him a figure of cultural reverence, whose influence extended far beyond the medieval period. Moreover, Charlemagne's religious significance contributed to the mythic status surrounding his reign. As the champion of Christianity and the protector of the papacy, Charlemagne became a central figure in the development of medieval Christian identity. His alliance with the Church, symbolized by his coronation as emperor, solidified his role as a divinely ordained ruler. The idea of a Christian emperor, one whose authority was sanctioned by God, was essential to the ideological framework of medieval rulers. In the centuries after his reign, Charlemagne was revered as a saintly monarch, and his image was closely tied to the notion of Christian kingship. His efforts to ensure the spread of Christianity, build churches, and establish educational systems rooted in religious teachings reinforced the perception of Charlemagne as a ruler who fulfilled God's will on earth. In addition to these political and religious factors, Charlemagne's mythic status was further reinforced by literature and art. The epic poem La Chanson de Roland, one of the most famous works of medieval French literature, immortalized Charlemagne as a legendary hero, celebrated for his bravery and wisdom. The poem portrays him as a near-mythical figure, revered by his knights and beloved by his people, whose rule was a golden age. This romanticized image of Charlemagne as an invincible and noble ruler persisted throughout the medieval period and beyond, influencing the Arthurian legends and the myth of the knightly king that became central to European chivalric culture. In the early modern period, Charlemagne's legend continued to serve as a model for political legitimacy. European monarchs, particularly in France and Germany, sought to connect themselves with Charlemagne's legacy as a way to assert their own authority. For example, the French monarchy often invoked Charlemagne as a foundational figure, as they claimed to be the rightful heirs to his empire. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, who crowned himself Emperor of the French in 1804, sought to link his reign with Charlemagne's imperial image. Napoleon saw himself as the successor to Charlemagne, and he even revived the imperial crown of Charlemagne as a symbol of his authority. The use of Charlemagne's name and symbolism continued to shape the political rhetoric of rulers who sought to unite Europe under a single banner. Furthermore, Charlemagne's legacy extended into the modern era in the form of European unity. In the 20th century, As European leaders sought to heal the divisions left by centuries of war, Charlemagne's mythic status as a symbol of unity was invoked once again. The idea of a unified Europe, free from the tribal and national conflicts that had plagued the continent, found a compelling figure in Charlemagne. Leaders such as Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman, who were central to the formation of the European Union, saw themselves as working in the spirit of Charlemagne's vision of a united Europe. The Charlemagne Prize, awarded annually to individuals who have made significant contributions to the European integration project, underscores his enduring role as a symbol of unity and cooperation. The myth of Charlemagne also persisted in popular culture, where he continues to be portrayed as a heroic figure. Films, books, and television shows have often depicted Charlemagne as the ultimate ruler, wise, just, and powerful, who stands as the epitome of Christian kingship and medieval heroism. His reign has become the archetype of medieval greatness, and his legacy is often invoked whenever discussions about the European past are undertaken. In conclusion, Charlemagne's status as a mythic figure has been constructed over centuries, shaped by political needs, religious ideologies, and cultural narratives. Though his actual reign was marked by both successes and struggles, the story of Charlemagne's empire and his vision for a unified Christian Europe has endured. His legacy has been continuously reinterpreted to suit the values and aspirations of subsequent generations, and his figure remains an enduring symbol of European identity and unity. As the father of Europe, Charlemagne's influence on the continent transcended the confines of his own time, and his reign continues to fascinate historians, political leaders, and the public alike.